So it's been a little bit of a while since I've talked about Final Fantasy on the channel, but really I'm impressed by this port that I'm seeing of Final Fantasy 7 Remake integrated obviously on the Nintendo Switch too. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised because I don't know why. Obviously last year they announced that they'll be going cross-platform with a lot of their releases and stuff like that, and really trying to get their stuff as pretty much on many platforms: Nintendo, PlayStation, Xbox. They didn't care anymore. PC, like anything, mobile if they could. It's just really surprising because obviously they kind of been Square Enix as a whole has kind of been going through this little slump, and it's really looking grim. Well, at the time it did. Now I would say it's looking a little bit better as they're obviously going for this, because obviously, again, I'm surprised it took them this long to decide to go cross-platform and multi-platform, whatever. Um, I did say cross-platform beginning. I mean multi-platform, but anyway, it is interesting because Persona, I guess you could say their rival in a sense, or one of their rivals. I don't know how you see the dynamic between Persona and Final Fantasy, but essentially that game has been on many platforms now. It kind of went multi-platform a little bit while back, and it's worked out really well for them. I don't know why people thought Persona was a PlayStation exclusive. It was just really Sega just trying to leave it on the PlayStation, as that just was a safe option. But even again, a lot of developers kind of missed out putting their stuff on Nintendo Switch. Now, of course, Final Fantasy, for example, couldn't fit on Nintendo Switch. Regardless, like, it's an amazing game and stuff like that, but I don't think anyone wants to see Sephiroth really uglified or whatever like that. Cloud or even Tifa or an Aerith, especially those characters, because I don't think anyone wants to see this weird, ugly, sort of muddy picture of them. It's just like we all expect a really high quality version of them because we're just kind of used to that by now when it comes to Final Fantasy characters. So seeing like a weird, ugly port of them would be really strange. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I know a lot of people probably feel a certain type of way about it. But I am really happy that they are. Now, again, when they was talking about, obviously, Final Fantasy, they didn't just say Final Fantasy 7 integrated, they said the Final Fantasy, I think what is it, series, like Final Fantasy 7 series or something like that. And it's really interesting because they kept kind of saying, I think they said that twice, meaning we could even get like a rebirth port. Now again, I was expecting Final Fantasy, why did I move my mic? I was expecting Final Fantasy 7 Remake on Nintendo Switch to in general, but what I wasn't expecting was the idea of others. Now I don't know how others would work, considering they're quite beefy, sort of massive files, and not only that, just beefy games in general that I don't know if the Switch can handle. Obviously, I don't know, and I can't really confirm this or anything like that when watching this footage of the gameplay, but I'm not sure if they're using DLSS. They could, and maybe they are, but it does look like it's using something, because I don't know, it just looks, some parts of it look a little bit sharper than normal. Or maybe that's just me, but it just generally looks really good. Like, it's really shocking that I'm looking at this. I keep thinking this is PlayStation footage I'm looking at, but then I look at the controls and I'm like, yeah, this is actually Nintendo Switch. And it's really crazy that I'm looking at this. I don't know if it's a full native resolution that we're seeing, and not even that, the frame rate, because that's another thing that's yet to be confirmed, I guess. We'll find out, I guess, along the months. If you do guys, if you guys have any information like that, please drop it down in the comment section below, because that would be very interesting to know whether it is a native port that we're seeing or using some sort of form of DLSS. Again, it did look like it was sometimes going at 60 frames, then sometimes it looked like it was maybe going at 40 or 30. I don't know, I guess we'll have to see, really. But again, it's very interesting to see that Final Fantasy is kind of coming back on its, original platform, which was Nintendo. Because obviously back then, the reason why they switched over from Nintendo to PlayStation was purely because of, technology purposes, because they thought, nah, cartridges like limited at the time, so let's switch over to, disc. And there's more of a story of that, which I may or may not cover in the future. I don't know. It depends. It's just kind of like a well-known story by now, but it doesn't hurt to recap it, I guess. for newer people who don't know the Final Fantasy VII origin so well. So yeah, let's talk about the other two games for a minute. Now, I completely forgot that there was a Steam Deck kind of port of it when starting this video, but then I also remembered and I was like, yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, because that might give us a little bit of insight on how the Switch 2 compares when it comes to getting a port. Now, Final Fantasy 16 on the Steam Deck is absolutely unplayable, at least in the sense of, if you was expecting maybe at least 1080p and 60 FPS, good luck. We're probably going to be sitting at something more, a little bit lower, and not only that, you are probably not going to be hitting 60 FPS, at least in a normal sense. You would have to do a little bit of tinkering with your game to actually get that, and even then, I felt like that apparently makes some little ghosting effects present on the screen, and then what it's actually meant to. Again, I don't know how true all this is. I've seen a little bit of a demonstration of using, like, I think what FSR3 or something like that. I can't remember which number actually, but basically it just helps the game actually run. It can boot up just fine. It's just playing the game, you're most likely sitting at 50 FPS, which in today's standards is totally unplayable. Like 30 FPS is even debatable as being playable these days for a lot of people, which, I mean, in some sense, it's, for me at least, it's not really playable, but in other sense, yeah, it's playable. Again, it just really depends on your preference. But seeing that game, it kind of runs a little bit on the lower side, and considering that had a little bit more RAM going for it than something like the Switch 2, which only has 12, it is something to keep in mind. So they'll be technically working with less RAM, but they will be working with something of DLSS technology, which, you know, they could maybe put the game at, I don't know, 540p or something like that, and then upscale it to, I don't know, 1080p. Won't be CD native, that's for sure, because I just feel like that's really hard to get. So that is more on the interesting side, and considering the effects and all the cutscenes and stuff like that, I don't know. And even some of the gameplay moments, especially where it gets more towards the end, which even I don't even know, but, or fully, but I won't spoil it for you. Let's just say really big climactic, real cool things. I mean, you kind of see it in the trailer anyway, with all these summons you have to fight. They're very big fights anyway, you can tell, especially how they present themselves in the game, and just generally how they are. So that is something to definitely take in mind when considering a Final Fantasy 16 port. So I don't know, fingers crossed that, you know, runs at least 60 FPS, or, you know what, 40 FPS is just fine, you know. I wouldn't mind if it was 40 FPS, you know, 1080p maybe. Something at least playable in that sense. And it's actually looking really, really, well, okay, really good. But that's just me. Anyway, let's move on to Rebirth, which actually might stand a little bit of a better chance this time than something like Final Fantasy 16. Now, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, I'll be using, again, the Steam Deck as an example. It did run at something like, I don't know, 720p when I looked at it with other people at 30 FPS, but that's only with settings low, so you could be, you know, doing the same thing like Street Fighter and Cyberpunk, downscaling it from, I don't know, the highest resolution to maybe 540p, and then obviously using NVIDIA, then upscaling that. And possibility of a 1080p 40 is a lot higher, I would say, than Final Fantasy 16. That's purely because, I don't know why exactly it has a better chance, considering that I'm pretty sure Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth is an open world game, while as Final Fantasy 16 isn't, oh, kind of, but I think it does have like little loading points. I could be wrong. I don't know how it fully works with the two games, but it is interesting to know that it does have a higher chance than that. So I don't know what we can exactly expect from these games. I just hope that they run at least 1080 at 40 FPS, you know. That's kind of the target. It would be great if it can run at 1440p and maybe 60, but that's just me being way too hopeful. Even again, I don't even know how hopeful I can be with 1080 and 40 FPS. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think of all of this. Do you think the Nintendo Switch 2 can handle Final Fantasy 16 as well as Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth? And could we see some extra additional content, maybe like costumes and stuff like that for this port? I doubt it, because they just probably want to keep it neutral and pretty much the same. They'll probably just include all the pre-order stuff and whatnot. Again, there'll probably be a fidelity mode and a, what you call it, graphical fidelity mode and a frame rate mode. So I don't know what the two modes will differ. Maybe like 10, 80, and 30 FPS. Well, frame rate is probably like 1080 and 60. Not 60 actually, sorry, 40. Don't know where I was going with that idea. Again, that's just my theory as to what's going to happen. We will just have to wait and see what the Final Fantasy series on the Nintendo Switch 2 would look like. So if you're excited like me and you really want to see these ports, let me know in the comment section below, and why not do a favor and, you know, subscribe to the channel. You don't want to miss out maybe some more Final Fantasy content on the channel, or just generally any gaming content if you guys like that too. Make sure to like the video if you enjoy it, and share this with your family and friends. And not only that, I felt like this would also help them generally, Square Enix, when it comes to recouping money when it comes to development cost of Final Fantasy 16 as well as Rebirth. Mainly 16, since I know a lot of people mentioned, and I know Square Enix kind of, you know, dissed it in the sense that it didn't sell as much as they hoped, but they say this with a lot of their games, so take this with a pinch of salt as always. Again, I hope you guys enjoy your day, and, well, yeah, have fun, guys.